welcome to the Retro Baseball Game Challenge, where I'll be playing every old baseball game I can get my hands on, and in today's debut episode, we'll be playing The Bigs 2, an arcade baseball game released by 2K back in 2009. I've never really played it until making this video. At the end of each episode, we'll give the game a rating. And with a little sneak preview of what we're playing next, so without further ado, let's play The Bigs 2. So before we get started, I should mention that I am playing the PS3 version of the game on an ultra slim model. I know this might not seem too important for this game, but as we play older and older games, I'll be sure to mention what hardware I am using, as it may affect how these games perform. Alright, so when first booting up The Bigs 2, I was happy to see Prince Fielder was the cover player. Not entirely what I would have expected, but it really takes me back to when Prince was hitting bombs at Miller Park in his heyday. What I also think I'll do with a lot of these videos is jump right into an exhibition game to give you my first impressions. Being an arcade style baseball game, it should basically be pick up and play, right? Right away, there were three aspects of The Bigs 2 that jumped out immediately. The first being the presentation. The zoomed in camera angle that highlights the actions on the field was a bit shocking at first, after really just playing the show for the last several years. It took a couple games to adjust the field of vision, but I did get used to it pretty quickly. I'm not sure I ever loved the camera style when playing, but I did find it fit the gameplay pretty well. The second aspect that jumped right out was this wheelhouse mechanic. So I learned in later games how it would work, but essentially every player has a sweet spot that's colored red, the size of which is dependent on how good a hitter is, which you'll see in the gameplay videos here. You will get a little boost to your hits for any pitch that's thrown here that you make contact with. So why would a pitcher even pitch there? Well, if you throw a ball in a player's wheelhouse and they miss it, you can shrink the size of their wheelhouse for future pitches and at-bats, and your own turbo meter at the top of the screen will increase. You can then use this turbo for charged up swings and pitches, something that is essential when playing the game on harder difficulties. Also, right out the gate, the over-the-top announcer calling the action was reminiscent of the Slugfest series from Midway, a game that I will be playing at some point in this challenge. Just like in Slugfest, he is constantly making fun of your performance, and I find that wildly entertaining. Think of it like if the NBA Jam commentators were placed in a baseball game. That style teleports me back to the late 90s and early 2000s pretty much immediately, and you may feel that nostalgia as well.
What? Bring me food for my men and water for my horses!
After playing a couple exhibition games, I decided to see what else this game has to offer, and well, there was something called Run Pinball, an option from the main menu. So yeah, let's see what that is. I don't know what I was expecting, but after selecting a player and location, I think there were 3 in total, I am treated to some batting practice in the middle of Las Vegas Boulevard. Your goal is to basically destroy the city by hitting baseballs at every object on the screen. You can stack combos to go for bigger targets and find some hidden objects that may appear, but as you do that, the pitching will get harder and harder. They'll add different breaking pitches just to mix it up and make it more difficult. This is honestly such a weird and random, but awesome game mode. And for as weird as this was, this actually is where I learned more about how to aim my hitting, something that is essential to your success both in this pinball mode and regular games, which you'll see moving forward.
That ball is hit and hit well. And that ball is gone. See ya, home run.
So after putzing around for a bit more, it was time to take on the main part of The Bigs 2, and that's the Become a Legend mode. I thought this would play like the Superstar modes of other modern sports games, but it's kind of a team building hybrid, which I'll explain in a bit. After creating my player, I decided to recreate a young Andrew McCutcheon, my favorite player in real life, and too young to actually be on the Pirates roster in this game. I think it was 1 year before he made his debut as a rookie. You're sent to Mexico to prove yourself after a career-altering injury. After playing just a couple games in the Mexican League, the MLB comes calling. Kind of random, but whatever. I chose the Pirates, the objectively worst team in the game, which I regretted for a bit until I got better at playing. Once your team is chosen, you will then play a series of games and challenges, everything from 5-inning games against other baseball teams to more pinball games to skill-based mini-games. These combine to elevate your player's stats and advance your team through the coming seasons. Essentially, the Become a Legend game mode weaves a storyline for your player and team on their way to the Hall of Fame. This is not what I expected it would be, but I honestly loved the balance with focusing both on your own player and the team's success. The in-game challenges remind me of the Moments game mode in the show series. For example, you might be given 2 goals before a game starts, both win the game and hit a home run. Occasionally these can be frustrating deep into the game, but I thought it was a nice way to mix up the gameplay. After some events, you can steal players to make your team better, and that team building mechanic reminds me of the show's Diamond Dynasty, and the minigames remind me of old school Madden training games. I stole Adam Dunn from the Reds pretty early on, and he pretty much became my best power hitter for the rest of the game mode. Also, something I've been noticing as I play old baseball games, I love rediscovering players that I have since long forgotten, Adam Dunn being the example here. There is also a huge variety of fielding, running, and hitting minigames sprinkled in as well. This trifecta of gameplay experiences really makes this an awesome overall game mode, especially for an arcade game that's really ahead of its time. The experience lasts for 4 seasons, and it's clear a lot of thought went into this game mode. I should say that seasons were more like missions and not played out over a 162 game calendar like a traditional season would. But, for example, when Season 2 starts, your team travels to Japan to play a couple of games against some Japanese teams. You play in a very specific stadium just for these games, and the crowd chants the entire time, just like they would in a real Japanese baseball game. Details like this help make the experiences unique. Outside of the Become a Legend mode, you can also play a regular season mode, which is very limited in every sense of the word, but I'm happy it exists. And so, yeah, that's pretty much all the big stuff you can do in the Bigs 2. I did want to talk a little bit more about the gameplay itself. You probably noticed a turbo meter at the top of the screen. This builds throughout the game when you pull off exciting plays, take pitches, and really anything positive you can do to influence the game. It's a 2-part system. The top meter is a point system that builds and builds, allowing you to pull off this big pitch or big blast mechanic seen here, and the skinny meter below allows you to pull off mini turbos and to speed up your runner, pitches, or shrink the strike zone when batting. This turbo system is one aspect of the game that I thought kind of got old and was a bit unbalanced. Often games became a race to pull off the big blast move, which if done correctly would completely change the outcome of a game. For example, if you decide to do it with no one on base, it gives you 4 pitches, and you can easily load the bases off of these hits and hit a home run. And a 4-run swing in a baseball game, even an arcade baseball game, is just a lot. It felt a little too overpowered and made the game less rewarding. I did come around on it a bit once I learned how to properly use it in-game, but it's still not a super fun balancing act of when and when not to use your turbo. This was really my biggest gripe with the gameplay. I didn't hate it, but I found myself focusing on that way too much versus just sitting down and playing the game.
LaRoche is up next. Runners on first and second, 2 down. big fly ball to the outfield. There's the run.
Alright, so since this is the first episode, just know that this is where we'll go through the pros and the cons of the overall game and give it a final rating. Hitting is up first, and in the Bigs 2 is probably the weakest element of the game. It's functional, still a lot of fun, but definitely the weakest part to the gameplay. The biggest aspect in hitting is timing, but I think it might play too much of a role here. If that makes sense, you have the ability to aim your hit anywhere, and it doesn't seem to matter a ton where the ball actually crosses the strike zone. As long as you time your swing right, you can almost pick where you want to hit the ball, and whether or not it was, say, a high inside fastball or tailing curveball, say, low in the zone, doesn't seem to matter as much as it should. Home runs also feels scripted, kind of, and would seem to go to pretty much the exact same spots over and over again, which makes me question the hitting physics just a little. Like when home runs and other hits in general go to the same 10 spots on the field, it just seems extremely limited. Also, like I mentioned before, the Big Blast turbo meter is a bit too strong, where a few too many games are more about when you use a power-up versus your actual hitting skills, and loses some of the gratifying feeling you typically get when trying to earn a big hit. Moving on, I think pitching is almost perfect. The median is very responsive and fair, and the cat and mouse game you play with hitters using their respective wheelhouse is such a cool feature. I wasn't so sure of it at first, but I really love how it's implemented, especially for an arcade-style game. Also, I like the concept of losing the ability to throw a pitch type if you overuse it, or if someone hits a big blast off of that pitch. I also like how players are rewarded with turbo for taking pitches, which at times may force you to throw strikes when you really don't want to. I think my only negative with pitching is it's a little too easy for a pitcher to get knocked out of the game by a comebacker. It happens a little too often and can be frustrating if it's, say, the first inning and your starting pitcher goes down way too early. Quick side note, fielding is solid, with the quick time minigames adding some adrenaline elements to making a good catch. Even if the legendary fielders are a bit overpowered and can really dominate a game, you'll learn very quickly just to aim away from any legendary fielders on the opposing team when you're batting. The over-the-top action combined with the camera zoom and usually entertaining announcers reminds me a lot of the MLB Slugfest series, which is not a bad thing. Everything fits well, stadiums look sharp, and the graphics in general hold up. My only negative with the presentation is I think there are just not enough legendary catch animations, which are fun at first but get extremely repetitive after only a few games. The commentary, on the other hand, seems varied, and I was hearing new one-liners even after tens of hours of gameplay. The Bigs 2 is pretty much as feature-packed as you'll find a baseball game. There are so many game modes on top of the traditional modes you might be used to in really any game you've ever played. Even though the season mode here is bare bones, it still exists, and it's just one of the many ways you can spend your time in-game. Become a Legend mode, Home Run Pinball, minigames all round out the package with lots of depth. I intended to only play through enough of the game to make this video, but ended up sinking dozens and dozens of hours into the Become a Legend game mode, which for a game that came out in 2009, you do get your money's worth here. If you couldn't tell, I really enjoyed my time with the Bigs 2. There's enough here to like for both casual and more hardcore fans of baseball video games. I can nitpick a bit at some of the controls and the hitting falls flat, but it really shouldn't be anyone's intention to play this game with the mindset of a perfect representation of the sport, and it doesn't detract from how much fun it really is to play. If the developer's goal was to make an entertaining baseball game that appeals to everyone, they did exactly that. Alright, so we're starting off really strong here with the Bigs 2, and it took a few games to grow on me, but then I really didn't want to put it down, especially with the Become a Legend mode, which again seems way ahead of its time if you ask me. I'm going to slot the Bigs 2 in as an A-tier game overall. The only thing holding it back is some of the hitting mechanics and some game balancing issues, but nothing game breaking. The sheer amount of entertaining game modes here for a baseball game might be second to none, even though this is just the first episode of this series. And it makes me wonder why we don't see more experiences like they're out there, especially arcade baseball games, when the Bigs 2 did it so well. I know this is just the first episode, so this is just the part of the video where I tell you what I'm playing next. And next up, we're going to be playing Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr., an N64 release published by Nintendo themselves. I remember renting this game from kind of my local game store back in the day, but I haven't really touched it in over 20 years. I'm curious if the game's going to date itself, especially being an N64 games, which tend to date themselves faster than most. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you like this new series, so subscribe to be notified for all future episodes. Peace out.
Hi, this is Ken Griffey Jr. Let's play Major League Baseball. It's showtime. Call me Junior. 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 It's showtime.